Couple CATA updates. We are very close to Hit the Hill, so we want to see as many people as we can out there in Denver for Hit the Hill Day. That is March 31st at 9 a.m. It's super, super important for us to be heard, be seen, have a lot of us there. I know, Ashley, you've gone before, and it was a pretty easy, streamlined process. You hang out with other athletic trainers, have a good time, and then you get a quick, 15-30 second spiel with your representative that you pop in there for.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's a lot of fun. You get to see how the government actually works, which was super cool and eye opening. Um, and it is a little nerve wracking because you do have to talk to a senator or a representative. But we give you the cheat sheet, we give you the talking points, we can practice with each other before we actually go do it. And then, yeah, it's a very quick, you just, shake hands, smile, and be a good representative of athletic trainers.
Yeah, and we're asking that when you go, try and avoid polo and khakis. Avoid your employer's regalia or uniform or anything like that. Like dress up business
Yep.
casual.
Ideally, no school logos, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we want to portray a sense of professionalism and stay away from the kind of polo khaki. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but kind of we just want to portray ourselves as more professional, to be taken more seriously. So make sure you dress up that business casual. And I went as a student with my professors when we did Hit the Hill Day back in Virginia, and it was kind of nerve wracking, but it was super easy. And I think a lot of people think the congressmen are going to ask you questions further, and more it's a you're the expert in this field and you kind of have to keep it surface level. So don't be worried about well, I don't know a ton about this. We'll give you all the information. You'll be able to answer any surface level question that comes back and you'll move on. So it's not like they're going to do a deep dive into what this means in this aspect. It's not that intense because they don't have enough time to do that. So it's really easy. It's not that hard and it's a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll see as many of you there as we possibly can. And we have a huge turnout because we need it. We really need to have a lot of bodies there. So, okay. So another thing we have coming up is the RMATA. It is down in Colorado Springs this summer. I believe it's May. It is May 29th to the 31st. Down in Colorado Springs. So make sure you book a hotel. We have a booking block for the hotel rooms. Make sure you register to go. We will be there, so please stop by and say hi. We'll be doing a recording in one of the rooms. So should be a lot of fun. We want to see a lot of people from Colorado there because it is our home state. We're hosting it, so we want to have a good showing. So please consider making it there. Should be a really good time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the CATA Secondary School Podcast. I'm your host, CJ Rosenborough, and in today's episode, we're discussing documentation in the secondary school setting. We're happy to have Ashley and Katie joining us to share their insights and experiences. But before we jump into the conversation, let's quickly break down what we'll be covering in today's episode. So we're going to have 4 sections because this one's a little bit of a bigger topic. I'm not really sure how we got there because it was supposed to be a quicker one, but it's 10 pages long on the outline. So we're going to have it 4 sections. First one's the introduction into our current documentation standards, where we are now, what the expectation is. And then we're going to go into what and how to document, and then roll into values to documentation. Why should we do it? Other than the obvious parts. And then the last section is navigating barriers and improving documentation. So how can we address this and get better at it? So before we hop in, Ashley, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, CJ. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And Katie, how are you doing?
Super.
Are you guys ready to talk about some documentation?
Oh yeah, let's
All right.
do this.
Ready.
So we'll start off with the National Athletic Trainers Association documentation, coding, and guidelines for athletic trainers. That's a mouthful. They state that patient care documentation is necessary and required for each episode of physical medicine and rehabilitative care and treatment. So they've put out some guidelines. This one's from NATA in 2017. It's the best practice guidelines. And they state that inadequate documentation of the services and care provided by ATs may lead to less than desirable patient outcomes and pose a risk to oneself, one's employer, one's patients and potentially the profession as a whole. They said, despite this, the document fails to provide what documentation would be adequate, which isn't really helpful. But instead, it focuses on the HIPAA compliant ways to communicate. So I don't know if you guys looked at that best practice guidelines. I was expecting here's what it should look like. And instead it was, here's HIPAA. Well, this doesn't really, I feel like it was kind of false advertising. Katie, what were your thoughts on that?
What's funny is then we have 17 references for this time, but it's half of the other ones are there's no specifications, there's no guidelines, there's nothing. So here's a whole document about how you're supposed to do your documentation. It does not give you any guidelines or specifics about what you're supposed to do, which is hilarious because why even write the document?
Yeah, it was just HIPAA. It's hey,
good job, you got HIPAA.
Yeah. Which it would be a good document if it was titled differently, I think. But sure. Ashley, what were your thoughts?
I agree. I've always kind of scrambled to find a better way to document and really hone in my documentation. But yeah, all of these references are less than useful. So
yeah, I was excited when I saw it. I was this is going to be perfect. And I opened up and I was it has nothing. Okay.
You're we'll use this one reference source. Yeah. No, we will use 17 reference sources. All of them say no specifics given.
Is that how many we got?
Oh, I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's 7, but we could have gone to 17. There was a lot. I had to stop myself.
Well, also, they all just repeat, but go back in years. So these are just the most current ones.
Yeah, they do kind of
that say the same things.
So, and we might repeat ourselves throughout this episode too, but it'll be kind of in a different frame. So we'll do our best to kind of navigate that. But okay, so moving on to the first article of the 7. It's Devenney et al., and this one's from 2024. And it's titled Organizational Expectations Regarding Documentation Practices in Athletic Training. And they address the fact that the best practice guidelines does not provide explicit standards of practice, which I think all of them said that. They all kind of referenced that form and they were this doesn't actually give us any guidelines. So we're not going crazy. They cited the lack of accountability and clear expectations as a significant contributor to documentation challenges. And they found that less than 50% of supervisors surveyed in their article reported having written organizational documentation policies and time expectations for recording patient encounters. Katie, are time expectations to record patient documentation encounters or document patient encounters common in your experience? Do you guys get that? Have you gotten that in your career anywhere?
Never. In fact, I've worked for clinical settings where they don't even account for the time for the clinical people. You're going to see a patient every half an hour, but we're not going to give you time to document. You can document while you're working with your athlete, which is just not true. Yeah. I can't, unless you have your templates already there and you've got them down to just a click science, which how, I don't know how you individualize it with just click science, but okay. But no, never, they don't account for it. And they're but it's just part of your job. And it's well, okay, but everything is just part of my job. And no one ever specifies for the longest time, getting someone to answer to me what needs to be documented, which we will get into, was fascinating because they'd be well, anyone you see. And it's okay, but what does that mean? Because documentation for an emergency case is very different than daily kids who come in. And then some would be oh, you only need to document it if they come in 3 times for follow-up. It's okay, but they return to sport. But what if they get hurt tomorrow? And then how do you backtrack? Also, it's supposed to be done relatively quickly after you see them so you don't forget anything. Also, I've been in the bucket where I had a sign-in sheet. They signed in. I looked at it and it had their name and their body part. And I was well, I don't know who that is anymore. I don't remember what I did with them. And that was 4 hours ago, let alone 3 days from now. I was I don't even know what their injury was today. I saw too many kids. So no time. Time is not accounted for in that process.
I just want to say I'm so proud of you there was 5 or 6 things you just said where I had a mini panic attack. I was don't go down the rabbit hole. We're going to talk about it later. And you did a great job of staying surface level. and just yeah, it was great. It was
I
fantastic.
read the rundown, CJ. You got it.
Ashley, in your experience, have you ever been given time to
Yeah,
do documentation?
I feel like I've always been told that it should be done within 24 to 48 hours. That's your ideal gold standard. Now, for us, sometimes that just can't happen, um, but yeah, I've always kind of been given that parameter. Now, have I ever been able to fully achieve that parameter? No.
Yeah, I've never been. I mean, yeah, I've never been given time for documentation. We're told, just like Katie, like, hey, this is part of your job, but then it's like, okay, well, my 40 hours are full of clinic coverage and game coverage, and I've been told anything from, well, get it done in between, or while you're in clinic and not covering games, and I'm like,
Do it on the sideline.
good, yeah, which we'll talk about that too. Yeah, so I've been told, like, kind of get it done in between, but yeah, if I see, I mean, shoot, we all know how it is in the high school setting. You see one kid, first kid of the day, and if you might not get a break until 20 kids later, and then you're like, okay, I don't remember anything. So, and that's one of the things that they cite in the articles going forward. So we need time set aside. So we'll kind of chat about that in more detail a little bit later. Ashley.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and yeah, doing it on the sideline for depending on what kind of game you're covering. But then if I do that, everyone's like, Ashley's just always on her phone. I'm like, but I'm working. I'm trying to do this. And
Mhm.
also, you run into, depending on what kind of documentation system you're using, it times out. So, like, if something happens and you have to, like, immediately put that down and respond to it, by the time you come back, your note is gone because it, like, the system timed out. So that sucks.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I've had a whole entire Scat 6 get deleted because somebody rolled their ankle. I'm like, oh, God, no. Okay, yeah, we'll get into that. Okay, so Devenney et al. Also cited several limitations in documentation, and we'll probably all be like bobbleheads during this entire section. Um, deprioritization. There we go, of documentation, and discussed how patient volume and few staff limited the ability to create high quality documentation. Ashley, what is high quality documentation in your opinion?
Ooh, something I don't do. I don't have time for it. I would think like a full comprehensive soap note kind of thing. And yeah, I don't have time for that in my clinic. I just don't. Um so yeah, I don't have the time for the S, N, O, N, A, and the P. I just do a quick sentence or two and then do a little quick blurb of like what I did immediately. And
Yep. Ash or Katie, how about you?
Okay, don't hate me. Don't
Oh
hate
God,
me. Don't hate me.
I
I'm a
already
nerd.
hate
I'm
you.
a nerd. Listen, I have years of experience. I figured out what works for me. I also did like a deep dive into this whole situation at one point when I did a continuing ed on documentation. It scared the crap out of me. It was a whole winter break scenario and then I had a summer where I did this. You guys, I have templates. So yeah, I used to be in charge of other people. I had to make sure they were doing things correctly. I have templates on templates on templates. And what they do is they are mostly just check boxes. Like to a point where like you go through and you just bold the palpation sites that are light up when you do your palpations. Like so high quality documentation is I did everything and I can show you how, and this was my outcome and this is why. And if I didn't do it, I also state that in there, because if you don't say anything about it, it's assumed you didn't do it. But
Mhm.
if I didn't do it, I'll say per clinical discretion did not do this because, but I have like that listed in my soap note now. So after every section it's like this. So my full injury, which are for actual injuries, not chronic pain or things that are like they're going to come in once and say, well, my knee hurts, and then I give them an exercise packet. Like those ones are just short little, I mean, they're still a soap note, but they literally just say subjective assessment and plan, and that's all it says, and then the follow-ups are their rehab plans. But high quality documentation includes all of it. Like you hit every palpation site, you hit every range of motion listen, we went through a whole situation where like if you just say normal compared bilaterally, well, if you don't list a percent or a angle, then you're not a full range of motion, then you're not actually comparing bilaterally, because you got to list what the angle was. And it's like, I'm sorry, it's nerdy. The template has what normal range of motion should be. So like if you're the knee, for example, like if it says like flexion to XX of 135 bilateral comparison, and then you put in what the actual measurement was so that it says like what it is. Okay, now I do not get a go knee out. I don't do that. I just eyeball it. But I also put that in there approximately per, not specifically measured determination. So the really good documentation has everything. Like you make sure every single thing that you've ever learned in the course of your evaluation skills is documented in that note. Do I always do that? No, but my notes exist that way just in case I do.
I love that. I have templates on templates on templates. I love it.
Can't speak enough about how important templates are.
If you say the same thing every single time, pop in a template, right? Like my plan.
100%. And I've had them across multiple different sources. So I've used 3 different EMR systems and Google Docs at one point because of it. And that is what I have come to, is you just got to have a template. So now, because they're saved in a Google Doc, I can always create them within whatever EMR system I'm using.
Mm-hmm. And it helps you be consistent too. Like our template, I can just hit enter and then I just roll through the questions. So I don't have to think about it. I don't have to remember. And then I can go a little bit deeper and add it as I go. I will kind of hold off on my answer for this question just because I cheated and I made the outline. So I have a lot of good information on what I think is really good high quality documentation. I think it's based on what you're trying to achieve. I think a lot of athletic trainers view high quality documentation in the secondary school as I can remember and I put down what I did and I can remember what I did. But I think we need to justify what we're doing so that if anybody else comes in, I did this because of this, or I looked at this and was able to roll it out because of this. So Katie.
2 more things. One, that it communicates exactly what your thought process was to anyone else who has to come in and read it, right? If you work with another person in your ATF, then they got to know what you did exactly and how you came to that decision, no matter what the not consistent athlete tells you. And then the other one is that it would legally save you in a court of law that says we actually did this.
Yeah, I always come back to the legal part. I think that's kind of the baseline for a lot of athletic trainers in secondary schools. I need to document enough to remember, but I also need to document enough to prove that I did what should have been done legally. But I think we truncated it a lot, and I think that's kind of out of necessity. So I'm interested to see what your guys' thoughts are as we get a little bit further into the discussion of what that looks like. Another limitation that they cited was assumption of prior training and quality. So, Katie, you've supervised athletic trainers before. Do you feel athletic trainers are adequately trained on documentation coming into the profession?
Not at all. Not at all. I used to make my students, when I had when there was a program close that had students come to my school, I used to make them write a note, and like every day, like if they saw an athlete, if they were a second or third year or third or fourth year or whatever, however their program broke down, I'd be like, no, you didn't eval, you have to write a note. And then we would go through the note because it, like, I have hired someone or been on the side of having to train a new person, and their note, like, I looked at them and I was like, you will lose this battle and this company will not protect you. Like, that's how bad it was. The lawyers would not be able to save you from this court battle. Like, you have to fix this. Because it was like nothing was included. Like they didn't even give a good subjective history of how the injury occurred. And so it's hard because and I can't imagine a lot of, other preceptors being able to say like, yeah, I just trusted my student to write the notes. But it was a part that I don't know, I was, of the 8 years I did it, 4 years in, I was like, you guys got to start writing notes. This is rough. Like we got to help you.
I mean, I've come into clinics where I look at somebody's notes. I'm like, I have no idea what you're doing, what's been done, or it's not in there yet. Ashley's always great about it.
In fairness, other professions that I've read notes for, not great either.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I would
tough.
guess that it is not just us that isn't awesome on the documentation as we come out, but it is for sure a learned skill.
And you have to
Um,
prioritize it, which
yeah,
we'll get into.
yeah.
Ashley, what are your thoughts on, are we trained enough on documentation?
Not at all, not even close. And like recently I've gone back to, I was in college like 15 years ago, but I was trying to find my old notes on soap notes because I know that mine are not that great right now. And yeah, I really just I couldn't find a whole lot, and I've never had really good guidance. But it didn't help that right out of school I went into a more professional, semi-professional sports setting, and the only documentation we had was like a running Excel sheet, and it was not that great, and there were no soap notes happening at all. So
So I saw a article, and I don't remember which one it was. I don't know if we actually put it in here. I think I was perusing it, but they recommended Excel sheets to track stuff, and I'm like, I don't think that's compliant with HIPAA or like an EM. Excel's not an EMR.
and it's not secure,
No,
and there's no way to like really write a good soap note in Excel.
right? Yeah, it was
No,
weird.
but it's good for like sign-in tracking is what
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
that's actually how I got better with my sign-in sheets was using an Excel sheet with a Google, right? QR code, Google link, and just basic information. Because the nicest thing about it was at least then I could have the Google sheet on my phone. And if it, happened real quick on the sideline, I could like talk to text real quick into my phone so that later when I wrote the full note, I could remind myself of what it was because it got real my memory got real bad
Mhm.
there. And I was like, I don't know who this is and
Right.
why their ankle hurt anymore.
And there's like, you can get in the weeds on this with HIPAA because you have to have a BAA signed with Google to be like HIPAA compliant and secure. So by signing in, it leaves you exposed like, oh, I'm documenting that this person came in for treatment or whatever, and it's not a secured. So, but then same with paper. If you're paper and then it's out to sea, so it's hard to stay perfectly in line and be efficient and do what's best. It's yeah, we'll get into the weeds in a little bit more. But did you guys have a chance to look at the soap note versus clinical note that Amy wrote up? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Perfect. We will discuss it then. So I thought it was a really good document. And Amy, I don't know if this was recorded. So actually, Amy's on the podcast today, our producer. So it's awesome. Hello, Amy. Thank you for joining us. You were doing fantastic. She had a discussion with one of her colleagues, Brandy, and it was soap notes versus clinical notes. And I thought it was really interesting. And she kind of delineates between how she teaches soap notes versus clinical notes. And she's like, it's almost like a soap note is I'm Amy, feel free to hop on here if you want to describe it a little bit better. I'm trying to truncate it into an explanation, but essentially like a clinical note was what they teach their AT residents of, this is how we need to document to bill insurance and hit everything that we need to hit. And I think she stated that the soap note is a rudimentary skill in how to write a note that usually everyone's taught, but they're not taught the detail that should be in the different parts of a soap note to make it a document that would show any billable components for reimbursement. I thought it was really fascinating because then she went and listed out, here's what's typically in a soap note, and here's what's in a clinical note, and here are the differences. And we'll get into that when we look at the billing reference that we have from 2011. But I thought it was really interesting to see just how much more and different the information is in a clinical note versus a soap note. So, from your guys' opinion, does a soap note versus clinical note, is it important to delineate? Should we be aiming for more of a clinical style note, or is a soap note adequate for what we're looking for?
If a soap note's not adequate, I quit. No, I don't have time for those clinical notes. Those clinical notes are insane,
They're
and they
hefty.
are built off of a template, and none of our injury systems have the ability to do that kind of template. I don't think so. No, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's reasonable for us to necessarily be doing notes like a clinical template to bill insurance because we don't. Well, some of us don't bill insurance.
Well, and I would say as a secondary school athletic trainer, I don't see a need for the codes. I see the need for the codes to dictate value and to show value. Like 100%, I'm on the side of using it as far as adding value to the profession, adding value to the cost of contracts and things like that. However, when I am documenting for a high school athlete, I'm not billing based on charges. I'm in fact not billing at all. And I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where at the secondary schools we're billing per kid that we see, and billing insurance in the schools. Like,
We'll chat
oh,
about that. Yeah.
if anybody's getting to that point, like the nightmare that I see that becoming, I can see both sides. I can see good in it. Don't come at me for this. But when I see 40 kids in an hour and someone wants to come at me for the documentation in that hour, um, why am I taping these ankles? Because a kid came in and asked me to tape his ankle, and it was easier to say yes than it was to argue with him, right?
It
And
will
like,
fundamentally change how the secondary school setting operates,
yes,
which not necessarily for the worse, though.
no, but it would be this shift we would have to see to get there tells me, no, I'm going to keep doing my soap note until forcibly change. If everything would have to change, and maybe then the clinical note will be easier to do, is my answer.
So a little spoiler, I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, and we'll get into it a little bit later. I'm actually really interested to continue that line of thought. But going back to Devenney, I had a lot of highlights from this article. It was a good article. And then I can't wait for the last sentence, because I was like, well, you just undid your entire article, in my opinion. You lost me there. So they also mentioned that self-audits and peer audits effectively improve documentation quality, but they acknowledge that this requires a high level of knowledge on accuracy, availability, completedness, relevance, reliability, timeliness, and validity to produce higher quality medical records. So is this realistic, Ashley, in the secondary school setting?
No.
Yeah. Yep. Katie?
We did audits.
How'd they go?
Currently.
Wait, you said we do audits. We used to currently. Do you?
We used to. We currently do not.
Oh,
the
okay,
old company I worked for did. The current company I work for did not. We were told to be very lenient with our audits, so there was that.
The purpose.
Not necessarily, because at least there was a standard. So that was, I'll start with that. There was a standard, there was an expectation, and at least you knew. So at least it was outlined of what you at least had to say these minimum things, right? So like in the subjective, you had to list the body part that you were evaluating. You had to list a pain scale. You had to list a mechanism for injury. You had to list, I don't know what else, but like, and then when you got to the objective, like there had to be some form of measurement. So it had to at least say manual muscle test of some kind, or you had to, or a range of motion of some kind. And if you didn't list those things, you could always say, did not perform range of motion due to pain, or whatever the reason was. You could always say, I didn't do it because, and then you always had to have an assessment. You had to give an idea of what you said the injury was. And then you had to have some form of plan that included whether or not you talked to the parent. But it also had a section that was demographics, and you got like 8 points just for having the demographics filled out. And if you imported your athletes, you automatically got the demographics section. So like you got like a 40% just for having a EMR system. But I mean, I like always missed a pain scale because I rarely listen. 0 to 10 for a high school athlete is hard. The amount of 8s I get is out of control. And so at one point I had given up on it, and then now I've gone back to it because it was required. And so I would always be like, oh, extra point in my audit for getting that question in there.
Was that supervisors who did it, or did you guys do peer?
So I actually did it multiple different ways. Yes, for a while I did it just as a supervisor. I would pull, and it was also across like 5 notes. So you would pull a random 5 notes from a season. It also, as a supervisor, kept me on track of making sure we had people documenting things, because I had someone who was like, well, I haven't seen anyone. And I'm like, 0? You've seen 0 kids this entire fall season?
Yeah, it blows my mind. And that's not unique. It's
right.
unfortunately common.
So how did you see 0, and what is the justification for keeping you at that school? Like, what are you doing at work every day if
Yeah,
you've
why are
seen
we
0?
paying you?
Right. Well, and why is the school paying us to have you there? Like, what? There's a whole situation with that. And I was like, you got to at least put something in. You can't tell me that 0 children have been injured this entire time. So it did like make it made people document at least something. They had to have at least 5 notes in. But then it also, like, for brand new athletic trainers, at least gave them a reference for what minimum to put in their note, right? And then once we got past the first stage of implementing this, then we kind of roundtabled it, and so everybody did somebody else, and so then I didn't have to do all the work. Everybody, but then you got to see how everybody else wrote their note. So like someone who was auditing mine, if they were brand new and they were like, "Oh my gosh, Katie puts all this stuff in there. How did she do that?" But they see it, and then they'd go to the next person and be like, "Oh, this person doesn't put anything in their note." And so it's just like a good way to see how everybody does their own notes.
Yeah, we did one in my 7 years as an athletic trainer, and I thought it was cool because I got to see what the format looked like, and I was like, "Oh, I like that. I'm going to take that and add it into mine." I'm a nerd, so I would love to have audits because I'm always trying to get better at it. But don't roll your eyes at me, Ashley. I'm going to go audit your notes now. I'm going to send them your way.
You will cry.
Don't do it. You know what auditing does? Makes you really worried. I will tell you this. One of our staff meetings was strictly, I did not give them warning ahead of time. We strictly did what do they call it in the high school? Like a fake lawsuits. Anyway, we like mock trial. We did mock trials.
Oh, that's fun.
And so none of them knew, and I like that morning pulled a note from everybody at random. Like, I didn't know which note I was pulling. I was just like, "Oh, this one for you. Oh, this one for you." And then we had just hired like 4 new staff, and it was their first staff meeting, so it was really great. So they were the jury, and we pulled a note, and I was like, so this athlete that you had on this date, they're now suing you because of whatever the reasoning could possibly be 7 years from now. You're going to have to defend this note. And just everybody in the room's eyes just went, "Oh no." And then I had enough printed for everybody to go through the note. And then I was like, "What questions do you have?" And suddenly everyone was like, "I don't want to do this anymore." And I was like, "You're not going to want to do it in 7 years from now either, is the problem."
I'm not going to lie. That keeps me up at night sometimes. Where I'm like, because I've seen some weird things go way sideways when I'm checking in with the athlete, let alone if they never come back and then they say something weird happens and they're like, "Well, it was because of what CJ did." And I'm like, you stubbed your toe. Yeah, that terrifies me like 7 years later. And I think that's one of the main motivators of why I try and like document pretty well is because I can't remember yesterday, guys.
When it happens, it's like, you like your stomach drops. Like I had someone call, they called the school phone one time, which again, high school setting, the fact that I was still there, which again, I was at the same place for a very long time, so kind of unique. But I had a kid who suddenly was going to pilot school, I think is what he was, something along those lines. And he had reported that he had a concussion in high school. And he called me because he needed records for it. And I was like, so he's telling me when it was, the year, all of this information. So I'm going back trying to pull this record. And then he tells me it was a boys soccer. So obviously he was an adult male by now, but boys soccer, but his concussion was during club soccer in the spring. And I was like, "Oh, you are stretching every ounce of what my capacity would have been in April for a boys club soccer player that is not related to the high school." Right.
And did he even come see you?
Right. And so that was, so I did in fact have his online concussion form, because he did come in, because we baseline tested everyone. So he had in fact come in for a post-injury test. that I then so I gave him that information, but he never came back for a follow-up. So his score, I didn't have record of his scores returning to baseline. I didn't have record of him returning to play because I didn't document his return to sport because it wasn't even for our school at that point. I just gave him the test because we had his baseline. And I was like, I don't have your doctor's clearance. I don't have any documentation that says I evaluated and cleared you. All I have is this test. And he was like, that's okay. I think I can make it work. And I was like, okay, how are you going to do that? Like, I don't know what the rules for your piloting school are, but good luck, buddy. But my stomach, my stomach was on the floor. I felt so bad because I was like, I don't know if I can help you.
Yeah. And the next article that we talk about goes a little bit into how to navigate that, because it was defined as one of the barriers of like what happens when they just don't come back in. How do we, because how do we know if he comes back and says, well, Katie didn't document it, but I came for treatment, and you're like,
right.
Whoa, no, he never came back, but it's just the documentation just ends. So we'll get into that in a little bit. All right. Another thing that they cited, and this is when we get bobbleheady time. They cited a lack or literature that shows lack of time is a major barrier to medical documentation. Yep, there we go, everyone. Bobblehead. The rationale was that they were prioritizing patient care and managing high patient caseloads or event coverage over documentation, which I've heard in my practice people justify, hey, like my documentation is not good as it can be, but I'm prioritizing, like I'm doing what the kids need to have done and treating them and covering things. The documentation, I just get as much done as I can, but my priority is the care of the athlete. They also mentioned that this may be due to athletic training's historic nature as a cost containment effort, and that documentation has failed to be incentivized. So we're kind of touching a little bit on that chicken or the egg. Ashley, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think because we've primarily been hey, we can save you so much money on this and this, that we kind of view this as more cost containment, and documentation doesn't really, we don't have to bill insurance, so it's not really incentivized to get it done. It's more of for our memory and then protect us in case we get sued. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with it. It's not incentivized, that's for sure. I've never been at somewhere. And in fact, the majority of the places or times we've discussed it, they're like, yeah, it just has to be done. And I'm like, well, okay. And pre doing the audits at the last place, like no one was checking. So like until something happened. But then if something happened immediately, Katie, do you have a note on this? Katie, do you have this? And you're like, yeah, because my incentive is to not be sued. I actually always did it. But again, nerd and just like fearful nerd. I don't love saying we don't have time because I've heard someone at a school that had a quarter of the athletes that I have be like, I don't have time. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have time? I don't have time either. And I'm seeing, I've got X amount of athletes on my plate. But so that's a rabbit hole, CJ. We could get into it. But I don't love time as the excuse. Because I do find that there is always a way to get things done. It may not be the best it could be, but there are ways to get things done.
Yeah. I think if I remember correctly reading this, I think it was primarily like they just get as much as they can. So they document, but they don't do the high quality documentation because they can't for every athlete, which
sure
passes the sniff test for me. I'm like, yeah, that tracks with what I see. Okay. So my favorite part of this was they finished. So they've got this whole article. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And they finish with this sentence where I'm like, whoa, that is dramatic. So they finish with some pretty strong language stating a choice to prioritize other roles and responsibilities above medical documentation is a choice, albeit not an intentionally malicious one, to deprioritize patient safety, which I strongly disagree with. Yeah, I see everyone on the call today does too. If I'm not documenting because I'm watching somebody who's doing balance testing, or I'm watching to make sure they're doing something correctly to not cause further injury, that is not deprioritizing patient safety. I get where they're coming from to say like documentation helps us be consistent with our treatment and therefore safely progressing. But I strongly do not agree with we're deprioritizing patient safety by not adequately documenting. Katie, I'm gonna let you go because you look like you're about to burst.
I'm twitching.
So double eye twitches.
I don't what? Okay.
Yeah, that was very succinct and clear. Thank you. I'm going to
Yeah,
go over
yeah.
to Ashley now.
You just, so I understand if you work with other people who need to know this information the next day. So for like your role as someone who floats between multiple schools, agree. You do have to document so that they can continue care. But I would argue that it would be deprioritizing continuity of care as opposed to safety, because there is no part of me that this injury happened and I don't remember it and I'm not going to treat it appropriately the next time. Like, that is wild to me to say that you don't remember and you're going to not safely, like, no, I'm handling the incident as it comes across my plate. No, I'm handling it with the utmost care and respect for their safety. That is not what the problem is.
Ashley, what are your thoughts?
I just agree. I don't think that that's a good statement. And oftentimes I'm not documenting very well because I am slammed and I'm trying to worry about the safety of 20 people all at one time. Um, so yeah, I think that's a pretty misguided statement. And it's definitely not based on, I think, the athletic training setting.
I agree with the safety aspect here. Like, the amount of like I focus on so much safety is because there's 45 kids in the room right now that I have to worry about the safety of all of them. Yeah, my documentation is going to be 3 days behind because I've been so slammed with the amount and the workload. But I don't find that I it would be more deprioritizing safety to be doing my notes on the sideline of a game just to get it done, because now my face is in my phone, or I'm focused on trying to talk into my phone at least while a game is happening, and then somebody goes down on the field and I didn't even see it occur because I got my face in my phone or my computer trying to do the documentation.
I think a better way to say it is you're prioritizing patient safety over good documentation. But yeah, the way they said it, I was like, I got to the end of it like, whoa, where did that? Because it comes out of nowhere in this article. I'm like, okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the next article. This is Welch Bacon et al. From 2017, and it's titled Athletic Trainers' Perceptions of and Barriers to Patient Care Documentation. And that's a report from the Athletic Training Practice-Based Research Network, which I think most of them are all from that going forward. So I'm not going to throw that out there every time, but Welch, Bacon et al. From 2017. So their research has reported, they state that research has reported that ATs may not be documenting all aspects of the care provided to their patients. Agree? Okay, that's not even a question. One AT in this article stated that athletic trainers are typically on their own and not interacting with other healthcare professionals, so they don't have to show their documentation to anyone. And he cited that as a reason why it's not up to the standards of like the billing and other physical therapists where they might be trading between PTs or PTAs. It's just for us to remember for a lot of the time. And they stated that perception that documentation is not as important as other aspects of care is another reason why it's lower on our kind of priority list. So, Katie, do you think that documentation is a part of care, or is it separate from the care, or is it just CYA?
It is a part of care. I think it is a part of your job and you have to do it. It's very much, a lot of people see it more as CYA than it is a part of what they plan for their patient care. Again, a lot of experience and a lot of focus on I participated in a quality control study where I improved my documentation was my task. So again, full nerd here. It's important. And I argue that I actually share my documentation quite a bit more than maybe other people do. But if I have a concussion, I send all the notes. I send it all. I send everything with them so that doctor feels comfortable clearing them. If I have an athlete that goes to PT, I have no problem sharing my notes with their PT if we can, right? Most of the time we can, it's by phone or whatever, but I've never had an issue sending a note where it says, hey, this is what I saw. It's not outlined like theirs because they have a better template than I do, but if they go see the doctor, I screenshot my information to the ortho that I'm like, here's what I saw on the field. Because I've no shame in doing that. Some people don't want to be wrong or they don't want to be judged for it, but I mean, I made an assessment that said I need somebody else's opinion, so I send it. Again, if it got called to a court of law, I would rather be embarrassed by a interprofessional communication than I would in a court of law. So I make sure that what I'm writing is valuable to another person. And again, when you work with multiple people, communication just in your own athletic training facility is also important.
Yeah, Ashley, I think a lot of the fallback is, hey, this is CYA. I'm documenting what I did, but I'm not using it as a progression of care, and I'm not using it as a communication standard. What are your thoughts on is that holding us back on being better at documentation? Because we don't, as athletic trainers, I feel like we don't communicate with outside health professionals as much as we could. And is our documentation holding us back in that regard?
I don't think it's holding us back, and I don't think it will until we have proper staffing in our athletic training facilities, because I think that is the biggest reason of what's holding us back. Is because I don't have time because I see 50 kids a day, and I can't do a soap note on all 50 kids. And a doctor's office is not usually seeing 50 kids a day, um, so I don't think that we are like holding ourselves back. I'm not sure if that's how you kind of almost meant that question, but I think if we had proper staffing and enough time, then our documentation would just automatically get better. Like I don't think that a majority of our athletic trainers would just keep doing the bare minimum
Mm-hmm.
documentation. Because when I do have time, my notes are so much better. like so I really think it's not like us causing the problem. It's if we actually were properly staffed, we'd be fine.
When I think this is your chicken and an egg question,
That's the
which
very next one. Yeah.
I like glanced over, but I was like, I was actually about to say this anyway. So, but like, if you were appropriately documenting everyone, like if you managed to do it for a week, right, and you appropriately documented it for a week, and then handed that printed off stack of all the notes you did to whoever your supervisor is or the athletic director or whoever, and you're like, here's this is just this week, they would be shocked by that, right? So if you had a way to be like, here is what 1 week's documentation looks like, they might be more willing to be like, oh yeah, maybe we need to get you a little more help.
And here's how much time
Right.
it took.
Yes.
You
Here.
have to
Yes.
track your time.
100%. Because I went into a contract negotiation over a year ago now, but where they were like, nope, we don't need more than X amount of hours covered at our school. And I was like, cool. When you work on your own in your job, how often do you see 45 kids in 30 minutes? And the face was just like, what? Oh. And I was like, okay, have you walked into the athletic training room after school at, exactly bell ringing time? Because that's how many kids are in there. And the response was, oh no, I avoid that place because it's a madhouse. No kidding. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. You are proving my point for you as to why you need the extra set of hands.
So the next point that they made was that 1AT cited lack of incentive to complete documentation because we don't get paid per athlete who comes in, and with reimbursement, we just get salaried. So if I don't do my documentation, there's no like money lost for the company or for myself. So they posit that proper documentation can lead to reimbursement, but reimbursement incentive might be needed to incentivize us to properly document, because I think, Ashley, you're absolutely right with when I have time, I'm much better. But also, if I'm getting more money per proper documentation, I'm going to find that time, even if I'm working at home, which I do now, but I don't get any extra pay for it. But if we have that reimbursement tied to it, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of what would that look like in the secondary school setting, because it would look crazy and vastly different. But I thought it was an interesting thought that they had, that to get reimbursement, which a lot of states are fighting for because it's tied to higher salaries, we need to document better to prove that we can get reimbursed. But then it's that incentive that we don't have that carrot there to be like, okay, we need to do this because I'm getting more reimbursed. So Ashley, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's just taking me down a really big rabbit hole of how much I hate insurance companies.
Yeah.
And just from I worked in a PT clinic for about 2 years, and my biggest problem was that I would like document and write my notes and be like, this is what I did. And I'd go through and I'd attach the CPT codes. And then my PT would be like, you can't do that. Like, insurance won't let us bill for that. And I was like, well, but I did it.
And they
So I
needed
had
it.
I had to fully change my notes, because if the notes didn't match the CPT billing coding too, then they would flag it and not reimburse. And so I had to literally lie in my notes and then miss things that I needed to have in the note because I wasn't allowed to bill for it. Like, it was so frustrating. And if athletic training ever goes that way in the secondary school setting, I am out. Like, I don't know. It was so frustrating for me, and I had to get out of that PT clinic ASAP because the insurance company was just tying your hands. So if that's what the kind of reimbursement we're going towards, I am so against it, because I truly think that it's not helping patient care. And I know Katie probably feels totally different about this. But go ahead.
No, I was just gonna jump to no, I would like to share the doctor's note that I shared with you guys from this week. And just like that one urgent care note, I just want that doctor to have to spend a day in the athletic training room with me. And because they quoted what the athlete said to them multiple times throughout the note, which tells me that they were so frustrated with this child and what he was saying. It's not, none of it's HIPAA protected, right? It's because it's just what he said was that he threw out his wrist. And I guarantee that this urgent care orthopedic was like, that's not possible. What does that mean? But that was his mechanism of injury. And he just kept saying he threw out his wrist. And I guarantee, like, you again, he saw a different ortho and got a follow-up appointment later this week. And then, as we're talking about this, the dictation machine messed it up, which I told you guys about too. Is that then the dictate? I'm like reading through the physician note that came back and said, "Wait, what? Now we have a new mechanism of injury?" No, it was their dictation messed up what he said. And so now I've got two sources of information that are going into my documentation because it's attached. It automatically attaches through our EMR. And like, what? Why do I have to lie about what I'm doing for treatment, Ashley, when the doctor's notes aren't even attaching and they're not appropriate for what this is? Did someone check that note before it came back to me? Because they weren't candlesticking or whatever it was.
And I'm naive on this because I've never billed for insurance, but I'm curious if it's like, if I do all these things for this athlete and I do rehab and I do taping and all that and I submit that and they only approve rehab, can they only approve like a portion of what you submit, or Katie?
Okay, let's go down this rabbit hole.
Okay, let's keep it quick though, because we're already an hour into the intro.
I know. Oh my God, it's so bad. I will quickly go down this rabbit hole because I worked in the PT setting and I actually did a lot with billing for a hot minute. So the 8-minute rule applies. And the minutes so for the PT setting specifically, I can't speak to other professions, but because I did billing stuff in the PT setting, I can tell you this. If like group therapy, like I don't think we're ever going to bill Medicare, and that's usually where the 8-minute rule applies to not just Medicare. There's the different forms of insurance each have their own rules. So all of them bill differently. And some of them, if you bill a hot pack, won't pay for it. If you bill eStem, won't pay for it. So even if you put a hot pack and stem on them, they won't pay for it. Also, they'll only pay for the exact amount of minutes, and it's a set rate. So if you charge, why even charge for more than 29 minutes of treatment if they're not going to pay for more than 29 minutes of treatment? Okay, well, so then you start adjusting your business model to fit the timeliness of what insurance will pay for. And in order to get paid appropriately for the staffing you have to fit your billed minutes to match the patient's scene. And now it's more a numbers game than it is an actual treatment game, because all you're doing is math every day to make your billing units match the patients you saw that day. And so then you can try to group therapy them if you have another coworker available to say that they're observing you at the same time. It is, I agree with Ashley. If we go to that model for a secondary school setting, I'm out. I will go
don't
work at Starbucks. I don't know,
see
you guys.
how it's possible.
It would be impossible.
But
You would have to claim group therapy the
Mhm.
entire time. And then if you had, say, a Medicaid patient, you would not be able to do that. So then you would have to see your Medicaid kids separately. I have no listen, it gets into the weeds because some insurances don't, are if it's a HMO, then they can't be seen in your athletic training room anyway because you're outside of their normal service provider. If it's not this, you have to follow this rule. So all of the different types of insurance, unless those insurances just say we will pay for athletic training services at their high school, it is going to be a madhouse.
Yeah, and we keep on coming to this reimbursement, which isn't, I mean, it's tied to documentation, but it's kind of not. But a lot of the research, that's what they're using as the standard is here's what PT, OT does. Here's what we need to be doing because this, and this is how we drive salaries. So it's kind of like every time we almost get away from it and then we come right back to it because that's kind of what they're citing as what we have. But I agree completely. It's going to change how we document, how we treat. I don't see how it's possible. I mean, without like major changes in the high school setting. But okay, so another barrier that they cited was that inconsistent follow-ups with high school students is a major issue to documentation. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. How in the world, Ashley, do we navigate when one day something is like a season-ending injury and the next day that kid's fine? How do we know, like, okay, you might have just like bruised your knee, or this might not even be anything. I'm going to see how you do tomorrow. They never come back. And then it slips your mind and you're like, oh, okay, they never come back. Oh, they're practicing. I guess it wasn't anything. How do we navigate that?
In what way? Because if they never come back, that's not really your problem. So are you asking like via documentation? Am I writing that full soap note the day I see them? And then I will go back in and write a note and be like, this kid never came back. Obviously, he's fine. Like,
That's what I do.
and I'll close it out. Katie.
Devil's advocate.
Yes.
Sorry. What if they did tear their ACL, but they jumped back in? And then they go down injured again 3 days later because it turns out they didn't have it.
Well, so if I told them, if I thought their injury was season ending, we had a much bigger conversation in education. And I definitely said, you have to come see me tomorrow. And if I never see them again and I told them they can't play, then again, like it's on them. I have 300 athletes. I can't chase them down. I can't keep track of them. I'm not outside at practice because I'm too swamped in my clinic. So I'm not catching these things either. So between my communication with the coach, when I told the coach that, oh, he's out, he can't play anymore. Oh, but now he's playing and he's fine. And no one told me that. And I just happened to like maybe see him at a game or something. Like, how do you, I've learned that I don't get upset. That really used to upset me. And I used to take it super personally and I'd get really mad and I'd yell at the coach and the athlete. But now I'm like, dude, if you were fine enough to play, I told you not to. So, in my opinion, I've CYA'd.
Mm-hmm.
I told them they can't play. And if they're playing against my direction, then that's on them and the coach and the parents. It's not on me.
Yeah, I've utilized like our treatment function. If they come in with something where I'm like, I don't know if this is significant enough or if it's just like they just needed it. Sometimes we all just need to have a moment, miss a day of practice, and we can get back to it the next day. So I'll put it in the treatment like came in for this, yada, yada, but I won't do a whole soap note because I'm not sure if it's actually an injury, which we'll discuss that in more detail. Kind of when do we decide to do these bigger, chunkier notes, but I'll put in a treatment. And if they don't come back in, then I'll put in like a actual note and be like, here's what I saw, just kind of the bare minimum. And like, here's what we did. Here's what we talked about. Athlete never showed back up. Athlete was seen practicing, like closing note, did a no follow-up. So I'll pretty consistently go through my notes and see what are open and close them out. And a lot of times it's just kids just never came back in. And then I close them out if it's like a cleared return to play, supervising for 1 week. And then if they don't come back in, I'll close it out. But it is hard, but it's not, I don't think it's as hard as some of the ATs in this article made it sound like. They made it sound like it was a big barrier. Like, I don't see the kids again. I'm like, okay, then close it out and document that and move on. Because you don't want to end up with like Katie had, where concussion and then they don't come back. You don't write in athlete never came back, because then it looks like you just didn't document anything. But it's not. I don't think it's a huge barrier. Katie, what you got?
Yeah, I think this is more a experience and education level. Like, if they come to see me, their coach isn't letting them practice the next day until they've been back to see me. And that's pretty consistent. It doesn't matter what if it was like a bruise and kind of the coach and I had a look that said, oh my God, they're over dramatizing this. And they just show up and they're like, oh, I'm fine today. And then like, then we make fun of them a little bit and we're like, oh yeah, we were being a drama queen yesterday, weren't you? And that's kind of one thing. Whereas the other side of it is, if they don't show up to practice for 3 days and then I go out and I'm like, have you seen this person? Because is there a follow-up? Have we called mom and dad to find out what the follow-up is? Right. And then we kind of dive into it that way, where it's like, oh, okay, well, they didn't come to school for 2 weeks and then they showed back up and they're just going to jump back into practice. Their coach goes, oh no, you go to the athletic training room. You got to go see Katie and get cleared before you come back out here. And so there's always that. If it's something minor, I think it's easy to put a note in, and I have the template that has assessment plan, and then the subjective objective are the same. And a lot of times it says, this is the history they said, per athletic trainer's discretion, no diagnosis required, or it's just diagnosed as generalized pain of knee or whatever it is. And then when they come back, if they come back the next day, I put a note in that says, athlete states they feel 100% back to normal and is going to attempt practice today, and then close the note. If they come in and have something continuing, then we report now, okay, 24 hours later, these are the new things with that injury. But at least then it's in there. It's not a full evaluation. It's just athletic trainer discretion says this. Because at some point you just stand on experience and say, this is what they're reporting.
And some of the guidelines that we've cited state, like, every patient encounter should be documented. That doesn't
Right.
needs to be a soap note. If you see someone passing in the hallway, like, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's feeling better. Good. Okay. Let me know if you need
Right.
anything. Document that. And it's just a sentence. Athlete said they were feeling good, told them to follow up if they need anything. It's hard to do. I know, Ashley, you're looking at me like I got five
I
heads.
was like, Ashley hates you right
Theoretically,
now.
that's what the thing said to do.
But you know what I learned is every phone call, I started documenting every phone call, because parents will be like, you never told me that. And I'm like, I was on the phone with you for 25 minutes. You just don't remember that I told you that.
Yeah.
But that, like, those phone calls are an important one. So like, even if I just speak to their physician on the phone, because a lot of times a physician will speak to you and then not send a clearance note because they talked to you. And it's like, okay, well, spoke with physician over phone, just to like dictate that into a note. So at least it's documented that that conversation occurred.
Yep. All right. We already touched on this one. So just real quick, but I have a follow-up question on this, because they mentioned it in the article in some way, and it kind of triggered my memory. So they cited time as a primary barrier in this article, again, which we all agree with. Lack of time allotted for administrative duties was cited. So my question was, how do we argue for administrative duty time? Do counties or schools value or care? I guess let me put it in a combative way, just to get the conversation started. Ashley, how do we argue for admin time and the increased hours and therefore increased pay and maybe more staff to allow us to have admin time each week? How do we argue for that when schools are getting the care and the coverage already? How do we say, like, well, we need time for documentation? And the school's like, we have you there caring for the athletes and covering the practices and games. You're already doing that. Why are we now paying more for you to do what you're already doing? Because we need more staff so that you can document better. How do we convey that?
I think that's a very long answer, and there almost is no win-win situation here, because something's got to give. And I think the best way, I maybe one of the best ways, in my kind of opinion, is that you have to, for like, if there's just me there and there's obviously not enough time, then I'm going to cut back on what I'm going to cover so that I actually have time to do things. And then that's going to show you how much time that it's taking me. So if you want me there to also cover those other things, then we need either more athletic trainers or way better pay. Also, I don't want to work 50 hours a week, so we need more athletic trainers. Is usually the answer. But it's like all school districts right now are struggling with money, and so I also see that that's just not going to happen, and it's not going to happen anytime soon, especially with the giant budget cuts coming down this year. um
Yeah,
so I think
I
it's a horrible cycle problem.
I agree completely. My malicious compliance in me wants to be like, I need time to do this. It's part of my job. I need to do this adequately. So I'm gonna treat every kid to the best I can, and that just slows down. I almost feel like, I don't know how I really want to say this, but I almost feel like us being really good at our job and multitasking and managing and getting everybody out and treating them, and it's almost a detriment
It
because everyone's
is.
like, well, you're getting it done. I'm like, yes, but I'm not. Am I really doing it to the fullest extent that I could? And I
And I'm
feel like the way to,
dying.
yeah, and I'm dying. And I feel like the way to show that is exactly what you said. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this properly, and look how much it slows it down. But then you automatically get the, hey, we're not getting the care that we like. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not doing it in an adequate time. You're not, kids aren't getting out to practice. You're not getting treated in a timely manner, yada, yada, yada. So to show how much time it actually takes, like Katie said, with the proper documentation, that time has to come from somewhere. And if you're doing that during the day, or if you say, okay, in between every patient, I'm going to take 3 minutes to do documentation, you're going to be so far behind and everyone's going to be mad. It's almost like we can't go back and establish that standard. And the fact that we already are getting everyone out, I don't. Katie, do you have any thoughts on this? I'm kind of just talking in circles on how to address the
No, for
question.
sure. I think we've done it backwards, right? I think as a profession, the traditional role of athletic trainer, I'm certain that at some point someone was like, you should probably write down all the things you do in a day, just so that our next person can mimic what you do. And kind of watching that unravel as I've moved on positions and going, oh, I am so sorry to the person who has to follow me because I'm a nerd and I, again, overachiever, do stupid crap, like write down what the weather was that day. You guys, I've documented in notes, like when there is a smoke advisory, it's in the note. And then I also, again, here's what I'll say, because I don't think I'm going to win this battle as I'm rambling about it. In your off time, you have to do a lot of work so that it makes it easier for you to do your job. I think that's where, when people are like, well, I don't know what you do all day, I'm like, let me tell you about it. Let me tell you how much work I have to do. And so I explain a lot of documentation to people all the time because they're like, well, you're just sitting in here. I'm like, nope, not just sitting in here. Actively know that you see me working on a computer, not just sitting. I'm doing documentation. That's when I get all of this stuff done. And it's in the template and it says like, so you can put a note in your template that says what the weather was that day. Because if you have 8 kids that come in one day having asthma attacks because the air quality is so bad that they can't breathe, and it's across all of the sports because we're going to have wildfires like crazy
It's
in
going to be bad
Colorado
this
this
year.
summer.
Yeah.
So come August, when we're documenting every single day what the air quality was, part of it is because, listen, I like to be told I'm doing a good job. And so when a community member called our athletic director and was like, these kids shouldn't be outside running. Have you seen what the air quality is today? And he was like, we do in fact know what the air quality is today because we have an athletic trainer who tracks that and makes sure that our air quality is appropriate. And that our athletic director can respond back and be like, that's why we have an athletic trainer. And it, you guys, I'm not a good example of this because then like they immediately are like, she's the best athletic trainer that's ever existed. We want to pay her more. How can we pay her more? And then if you know me, you know how things have rolled out and that happens to work out for you. So I am an example of winning by doing it all the right way and doing the right process. However, I don't know if it always works out that way for everybody.
It can go
Ashley
No.
sideways
can tell
quick.
you the
Ash.
other way.
Well, because of that 100% depends on the AD and coaches having your back and listening to you
Right. And understanding all of those
and
things. Right.
understanding.
Recognizing why they're important.
And money comes into it. Like if Katie, you're amazing, you're doing a great job. Like we're so happy we have you. We're also paying for you, so we're getting what we're paying for. But you're awesome. We're glad we got a good one. That's the mindset you got to change. Is if they're already like, well, we're already paying for you. We're getting what we're paying for. Awesome. With budget cuts, we carved out a section for you. And then you're like, but I'm worth so much more. There's that divide, which I think is very fascinating. And we'll chat about it in another episode. But I just thought it was fascinating to bring up because when we're arguing for our admin time, how do we do that? So just to kind of put on everyone's brain, sleep on it, think about
and
it.
I think that comes from having, like, I've had parents come in and call me out, and we never do meetings by ourselves, and I hope you never have to either, where if a parent wants to come in and yell at you, there should be an admin from your school in that room with you. Just little tips and tricks from Katie. But there should be an admin in the room with you when that person comes in to yell at you. Do not take that phone call on the sideline, or there better be a coach standing next to you when that angry parent comes at you. But if you documented correctly, and again, back to my phone calls that you document, I had a very angry parent because I stood firm and would not clear an athlete to return to play because they had not gone back to see their surgeon. And I would not take a clearance note from anybody but the surgeon because urgent care can't clear you when you had surgery. I don't care. And so this mom was really upset with me. It had been a full year because it was an ACL. And I would not let him, I would not clear him. He got a physical and I was like, don't care. Still a no play. He cannot play until he goes back to see his surgeon, who happens to be our signing physician and our team physician. There is no reason he has not been back to that office to get himself cleared. This is
You're an extension of him.
Right. You're not. Yes, I cannot clear you. This is not going to happen. I can do all of the testing to lead you up to being cleared. But until you physically walk into that office and do your follow-up appointment, I am not clearing you. And he's not clearing you because he hasn't seen you in 6 months or 8 months or 9 months or whatever. It was outrageous. But I had started, because I knew it was going to be a problem based on how things were going. He got discharged from PT really early in the process because he was no-showing all of his appointments. It was a whole situation. His mom came in hot. Ooh, she was upset with me. And what I started documenting was the phone calls that I made that didn't get returned. And so I immediately was like, here you go. Here's all 12 phone calls that I've made to you asking you to take your son back to the doctor's office. Here's the amount of times where I set up those times for you to go into that doctor's office. There is nothing I can do. There is no compromise that happens until you get a note from this doctor that says he is cleared to play. And that was how, but the admin sitting in the room with me was like, oh yeah, this is why we love Katie, because this is how it de-escalated the situation so quickly when they were like, just clear him. And I was like, I can't. And here's why. And it wasn't, there's nothing I can do. I won't do anything for you. It's like, these are all the things I tried to do for you. Here's what my documentation did. And then the admin was like, I didn't even realize you did that. And I was like, well, what do you guys do every day? Discipline happens every day at a high school. All of that communication is being documented somewhere. Guarantee it. I don't know how their systems work, but I guarantee they're putting notes in somewhere that says, we've called this parent X amount of times. And so that, again, it's getting in front of those administrators who recognize how much work it is, and then they value it more.
So I think we've hammered there's a lot to document and a lot of reasons, right? Like Katie just stated, reasons not even with the care of just like, I can't clear you because it helped with the conflict. So there's tons of reasons why we document. When we're in our ATF, usually we're in a closet. I haven't seen yours, Katie. Amy, I haven't seen yours. I know one of our colleagues up the hill has a gym as her ATF, and I ask her every time, and she's like, that's you, isn't it? No? Okay, I can't remember what school you're at. But yeah, they have an entire gym, and I'm like, how did you get this? She's like, when they tell you to ask for twice as much as you need, I asked for 3 times, and they gave it to me. I don't know what to do with it all. Is that you, Amy? Okay, yeah. She's got a massive ATF, and she's got her own little office in it, which I think it was cited a lot in the research of, hey, if I had an office, this would be easier to document everything. How do we document all these encounters, all these things, and have patients' files up while we're running around treating kids and be in line with HIPAA when anybody can look at our computer, anybody can look at paper files? If we don't have an area where we can kind of document and treat and go, like Amy can leave her computer in her office and come back and go and back and forth. Ashley, how do we do this in line with HIPAA when everyone can see what's on our screen, and we can't leave anything up, and we can't document something while a kid's standing right next to us talking to us or doing an exercise. How do we navigate that?
Well, I don't think you really can quite be super HIPAA compliant in a lot of our athletic training facilities. And that's one of my biggest griefs of people coming into my office constantly, is because I don't have a separate little office for my desk where I can do things in private. It's all out there in the open. So I like moved my desk so that it's kind of is as hidden from the front door and the treatment tables as I can possibly make it, like my screen. Um, and that's like the best I can do. So you just got to do the best with what you got, and hope that one day that changes for us and we get better facilities. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. But also, the other side of the HIPAA conversation came up in our team meetings recently, and it was very well noted that we have like 20 kids in the office at the same time, and they're all seeing and listening to everything I'm doing with every kid. So they all see it anyways. And then, and then I even love the kid A will be like, well, what happened to kid B? Like, kid B is sitting right there. And I'd be like, kid B has to tell you. And then kid B looks at me and like, wait, what was it again? So I just like,
yeah, and then you have to tell them.
Accurate.
Yeah, so me telling
That
Can
is
you
so
tell me
real.
what you told me already?
Yes.
Just tell them what you told me so that I remember it for next
Like,
time.
all right, now I have
Exactly.
permission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, our offices are very un-HIPAA compliant just by the nature of what we do. So, I mean, you just do your best, and
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Katie, I'll throw it your way. Ashley was talking. I remember this week I was at a school and we had like 3 concussions walk in, and we were doing evals while everyone's walking and getting taped. So it got backed up very fast. And I remember having this moment where I was in the far corner away from everyone, and I finished the evaluation. And I'm telling the kid like, okay, so you've sustained a concussion. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to call parents and all that. And right before I was like, hey, you sustained a concussion, I kind of paused and I was like, I'm just about to announce your injury to everyone in this room, but I also don't want to go like to an area where nobody is, because then it's me and a female athlete together, and I'm not doing that. I need to have somebody around me. And it just it was an aha moment of like, oh man, this is not. These things need to change. And we ended up going out into the gym, because it's like the athletic training clinic and then a stairwell and then the gym. But it's all open. There's no doors. So we kind of went outside, and I was kind of, all right, here's what it is. We're going to call your parents. But even that wasn't perfect, because that's right next to the girls' locker room door. So kids were coming back and forth, and they could easily hear one snippet of what I was saying and be like, oh, she's on return to learn protocol. Boom, she's got a concussion. So it's just hard. How do you navigate it? Have you thought about it? I'm kind of anticipating it's the same for all of us, of you just do the best you can. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you just do the best you can. The amount of there's no privacy anywhere. Like you're in a high school. I don't have a good answer to that. We have 7 tables in our athletic training room, which means typically there's 14 athletes in there because they share their tables.
You have 7 tables?
With 3 treatment tables, 4 taping tables. Sometimes the taping tables get pushed together and they become a very large high treatment table. But yes. And there's zero privacy. There's no privacy at all. We do have an office, so we could pull them into the office. I don't do that. I'm like, hey, I think you've got this. Let's go call mom and dad. Or a lot of the times I say, could you go call your mom and dad and tell them what I said, and then tell them I'll call them back in about 2 hours when I have time to actually call them back and talk to them about this. I'm happy to work at the secondary school setting where I don't get HIPAA checked a lot, because it's hard. I don't have a good answer for it.
Quick follow-up on that before we move on to the last part. Is that something we should be hammering more? Should we be advocating for private areas when we contract with these high schools of, we have a sink, we have a wet room, well, a drain, which makes our entire athletic training facility a wet room. But should we be hammering that more and be like, hey guys, this is not a good area. The nurses have offices and then their clinic. should we be hammering that more when we're chatting with schools of things that need to be improved?
Sure, but with what money, CJ?
Well, where are you going to put? Where are you? You're in a
Yeah,
private treatment
exactly.
room, a
And
female
where?
athlete, CJ. I'm not
Well, I
private
have a
treating
big
room a male
window.
athlete at all.
I
Like,
have a big
then
window.
it's
I can
not
leave
a
the door
private
open.
room.
Well, I mean, I'm talking more of like audio private. Like I can go into the room and everyone can't hear what I'm saying. I don't know. I think it's I don't know. I think there's a conversation to be had there. I don't know what the solution is yet. Ashley, you're right. Like with what money? But
Well, and
interesting
with
talk.
that requires appointments post taping time. Like that's
Mhm.
realistically like you're gonna have to go to an organized schedule, which I'm not against. However, I just 700 fall athletes. What's your plan here? Like
Mhm.
there's not an individual treatment time for anybody all day every day. So how yeah, if you put 5 athletic trainers at my 5A high school, maybe we would be able to accomplish that. But at some point,
So more staff.
correct.
Okay,
More
we're
staff.
gonna we'll leave it at that. Okay, so finishing out this intro, which we'll get into that a little bit. So the
This
NAT
intro, which will be episode 1.
yeah, I think we'll chat about it, but we might do section 1 and 2 and then split it because I think section 1's pretty quick. So the documentation and coding guidelines for athletic trainers by the NATA in 2017 listed a couple of reasons for documenting. And I want to get your thoughts on how many of the listed reasons for documentations do high school athletic trainers care about or actively do? How high is it on the priority list? 'Cause I'm sure we care about them. Do we prioritize them? So the first one is documentation provides the rationale for the therapy services you are providing and should show the link between services provided and desired patient outcome. I think I try and do that one and say, here's what I'm doing because of this, but that's a recent change. And that's not what I was taught in college. I was taught, here's the issue, here's the treatment, but I don't tie the two together. I assume that a medical professional could be like, we have decreased range of motion in the ankle. I assigned heel slides. That's a pretty clear. I assigned heel slides to improve decreased range of motion is kind of tying that together. And I think when you do some things that other ATs might not be familiar with, that can kind of help with the rationale and the treatment plan. The next one is provide the reader of the documentation with the rationale and reasoning behind your decisions. So kind of what I was just getting at. Documentation will communicate to other providers medical and other information regarding the patient from your perspective as the patient's rehab provider. And the file and the document should create a clean chronological record of the patient and their interactions with the provider. I think we do those last two pretty consistently. We use it as a communication tool. We document what's relevant, and then we document it in a chronological order of here's what's happening, here's what we've kind of done, rough outline, so we can track what we've been doing. I think, in my opinion, the first two, providing a rationale for what we're doing and tying those two things together so that the reader of the documentation can follow that, are less consistent. Katie, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree or disagree?
I agree, but it's hard. I think when you start working with another person, if you are not on an island and working by yourself every day, all day, it's a lot easier to do this. Because as soon as you have to start every single day being like, hey, what'd you do yesterday? Hey, what'd you do with this athlete? Hey, what was your what it and then it we all work
Essentially,
at a high
every
school.
injury is a new injury.
Right.
when that
Well,
happens.
and every kid is like, well, yesterday they had me do this, and you're like, okay, great, tell me what that is so that I can do it for you today. And they can't explain it. The amount of times like, oh, that can you tape me? Oh, they don't use that tape. Cool. What tape do they use, and can you describe to me how they tape you?
And they
Like
cannot every
every
time.
visiting school athlete who's like, that's not how they do it. Okay, great. So as soon as you work with another person all day, you get to a point where you're like, hey, can you write down what you did for me so that tomorrow when they come in and you're not in here, I can replicate it? That'd be great. Thank you. When that starts happening, this all gets easier. Until that happens, you're not used to it. You see that same person every day. You just go, okay, do what you did yesterday, or I'm going to tape you the same way I did yesterday, or whatever that answer is. You get in your own little world. and you do what you do and you don't have to worry about it. When you start having to work with other people, which again, I think is part of secondary school's downfall, is we all feel like we're on an island and we're doing it all by ourselves and nobody's helping us. So we get in this habit of only doing what we need to make sure that we understand it. Well, here's the thing, communicate with the outside world. And now it'll make your documentation a lot easier because you're like, oh yeah, I got to make sure that my coworker knows what to do with this person.
Ashley, what are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with Katie. I do work on my own island for the most part. I mean, I get you, CJ, like once a month to come help, but so I don't have to deal with that a ton. I don't necessarily, well, my notes definitely don't provide rationale for my therapy services other than ankle sprain, educated on self-care. Like that's my rationale. So yeah, it's just you got to do what you can do and do your best.
All right, so it only took us an hour and a half to go over where our current standards and documentation are because it's a lot. So all right, so that will do it for the introduction. I think there's a lot of reasons why this went so long. We anticipated kind of laying the foundation of where documentation's at in our profession and some of the barriers. And as we went through the research and we started talking about it, we realized there's a lot of areas that we had to dive into, and there's areas that we didn't even touch that we should be documenting that we didn't even discuss today. And I think all of that was really needed to build a foundation of where we are and why we are here, so that we can, in the next sections, discuss kind of further of how we improve that documentation and reasons to improve it. But we can't have that conversation until we kind of set the stage of where we are and why we are here. So took a lot longer than I think any of us realized. So we're going to cut this here and finish up the episode with that section. And then next episode, we're going to come back with section 1, 2, and 3, which is what do we document and how do we document it, values to documentation, how it can benefit you, and navigating those barriers to improve documentation, where we each throw in our advice on how to be more efficient, how to improve, how to overcome some of these barriers that we just laid out today. So thank you so much for listening. It's been a big episode. Didn't anticipate having to split it, but I think it'll come out better and kind of give us more time to dive into each detail rather than having a 3-hour episode going over all of this. So that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the CATA Secondary School podcast. And thank you so much to Ashley and Katie and Amy for joining us, giving their perspectives, helping us out through the episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, especially this one, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast and send us some feedback. This is something where we're not going to solve on our own. We can kind of set the stage, give you our advice, but we're also athletic trainers in the secondary school who struggle with documentation, and we need help. So if you've done things that are beneficial in your clinic or your ATF, please let us know, because we need that feedback too. And then we can blast out to everyone and help everyone and hopefully improve this as a profession moving forward. So we want to hear your feedback so that we can get all that out to you. New episodes are released every other Friday, so be sure to check back for the next one. And until next time, thank you so much for listening and take care.